Hello everyone and welcome to my North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service Public Accountability Meeting. I'm Commissioner Zoe and I will be chairing the meeting today. So going on to the agenda, so agenda item 1, attendance and apologies. There's only one apologies, which is Simon Dennis. Agenda item 2, minutes and any actions of the previous meeting. There are no actions and the minutes are from the previous meeting are recorded and published onto my OPFCC website to access. Agenda item 3, questions from the public. Unfortunately, we don't have any questions from the public today so far. And then agenda item 4, which will go straight to the presentation today, which Damien, you're very welcome. I believe you're going to be doing the presentation, so over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will just bring that up. Please let me know that you can see that.
Yes, we can. That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And the presentation today is on business insight and data. So first of all, in our journey to become a data-led service, we want to harness our digital capabilities, improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of us identifying and reducing community risk and vulnerability. To do this, data is a fundamental building block of the evidence required for improvement. But the value of the data comes from its analysis and the insight. We need leaders across the organisation to be curious around data and to be able to interpret the data to generate meaningful improvements. Effective use of the data allows us to generate meaningful discussions throughout the organisation, also to challenge our assumptions and to learn and to improve. When we look at digital transformation, the newly appointed senior leadership team and also our most recent NYFRS report have certainly been a catalyst for us as an organisation to re-examine how we operate. We are looking internally at what we can do better, but also looking wider to spot best practice and to identify subject experts who can support us in our improvement. This is an area which requires sector improvement, and digital and data solutions is one of 4 strategic commitments within the National Fire Chiefs Council strategy. To better that end, the Chief Fire Officer and I will be attending the National Fire Chiefs Council Data Conference in late April.
Damien, can I ask you a couple of questions about your HMIC FRS report? You know,
Certainly.
it was saying that found that some data wasn't accurate or up to date or available.
Yes.
So can you just give us an example of what that could look like? Just 1 or 2 examples and examples of what the service has done about it since the report was published.
Certainly. So within the HMICFRS report, as you've suggested, there were a number of comments that HMICFRS made, stating that we had some arrangements for managing performance with the use of data. The areas which they identified where some of the data wasn't accurate, up to date or available, within the report, they identified those areas as relating to fleet, ICT, and also within our shared support services. We have done lots of work with regards to the data that we capture, and I know that there's been a significant piece of work to automate information, for example, around fleet, following that within the report.
Thank you. And can I just ask 1 further question?
Certainly.
And that's about HMICFRS. And they're very good sometimes at being able to point you in the right direction as a service of really good, like to be able to learn from best practice in other services. And I just wondered, have they been able to identify those those services that are outstanding in this field, or good at least, that we've been able to contact and work with?
Uh, Thank you, Commissioners. So HMICFRS, within each of the reports, they identify promising or good practice which they have seen in any of the services. The National Fire Chiefs Council are actually working currently to develop on their website a portal, so all of those areas of best practice are captured in one area, for instance. This is an area of the sector that does need quite a lot of improvement, but there are some services out there that have received positive comments with regards to how they use data to inform and to plan their activities. And we are aware of those services and will be making contact through the NFCC conference and other means and looking at the report to see what we can learn from that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Some of the other comments that were made through HMICFRS was they made a positive comment regarding our development of the data dashboards, stating that the staff can access these to better understand the service's performance. And they also stated that the system the service uses to manage staff availability they saw as crucial. And they also stated that they've found some improvements in the way that that system was used, and they commented favourably on the way that the system links with our mobilising system in fire control. With regards our community risk profile, I've brought this into the presentation because our community risk profile, which articulates the relative risk in North Yorkshire and the City of York, is data-led. The open source data sets which were chosen for our analysis, these were chosen because they'd been validated by the Office for National Statistics. We've recently undertaken a lessons learned review from the community risk profile and the risk and resource model. And the community risk profile was described as a detailed and good product. Also, through that feedback, the combined fire risk map received positive feedback from a stakeholder's perspective. Future iterations of the community risk profile will benefit from more current census data and the ongoing community risk programme work, which is being undertaken by the National Fire Chiefs Council.
Jamie, can I ask you a question on the community risk profile?
Certainly.
Because it was published about a year ago now, wasn't it? And
Yes.
it should be refreshed regularly, shouldn't it, really?
It should.
So when is the service looking to update it?
We're looking to undertake that. I think I'm sure someone on the call will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was September, October that we're looking to update that and actually start commencing the full cycle of our risk management planning as we move to the future risk and resource model as well, Commissioner.
Okay, I've just got a couple more questions on the community risk profile, because it was a really good piece of work. It was so
Yes.
in depth, and you worked with your partners really well to collate their data too, which was brilliant, and integrate that into the CRP. But so is the service going to look at developing station risk profiles? So doing it at a more granular level, and will that help target interventions to local risk?
That is certainly something that we are looking to undertake, Commissioner. We do have station and district plans which target activity in those local areas. We are looking to develop that further because currently I would suggest there is quite a generic approach to how we do that, and we want it much more specific to the risk in each of those station locations. So, as you are well aware, we've got a number of stations, some in the city centre of York, but others in rural locations which have a very different risk profile, and we need to ensure that the activity is best serving the communities around each of those stations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the risk and resource model. The risk and resource model was completed using the community risk profile as a base, also third-party software and other data sets to balance our resource to risk. The completed risk and resource model through the feedback evaluation was felt to be robust, and the options were in line with our strategic intent. The Power BI dashboards, which assist with future iterations, will also prevent the need for data cleansing, which we had to do as we developed this risk and resource model. Some of the other feedback was that the third-party software had some limitations, and for future iterations, we believe it would be beneficial to review other modelling products as well as the one we used previously. As I've suggested, this is already being considered in advance of our risk management planning cycle as we look to develop a new community risk profile and we move into a future risk and resource model. But both the community risk profile and the risk and resource model are improvements on previous iterations of our integrated risk management plan. But certainly as a senior leadership team and as an organisation, we see these as the baseline and not the blueprint for future community risk management plans. Through our lessons learned review, we have already evaluated where further improvements can be made, and we are in communication with subject matter experts to make sure that we continue to improve our risk management planning processes. So when we look at performance management and scrutiny, Commissioner, we have access to performance data, which is reviewed at many of our internal meetings. So our service delivery performance meeting, our senior leadership team, and also this public accountability meeting. The data provides assurance to senior leaders and governance that activity is in line with our priorities. The data sets that we are using are being reviewed to enhance value and to ensure wherever possible we can have that one version of the truth that runs throughout the organisation. We are also looking to better align our data to that used within NYFRS and Home Office statistics. And finally, we're also looking to broaden the data that we capture. We have extensive data on prevention, protection, and our response activities, but less so in how we look after our people. So we will be developing performance data to monitor how well that we are doing that in the future.
Jamie, can I ask you a couple of questions? So you've just answered my first one there about how you're going to, is this an area the service is going to explore in terms of business insights? So it sounds like it is, that's great. The use and interpretation of data is a skill, isn't it?
It is.
So where are your skills gaps across the organisation? How do you intend to reduce them?
I think with that, we do have some skills gaps with regards. I would term it data literacy and looking at how we use the data, and it is really important how we interpret that and have the meaningful conversations, as I suggested earlier, so that we can move the organisation forward. I can see that the Chief has got his hand up, so I'm sure the Chief has got a comment around that also.
Thank you, Damien. I think an important aspect to consider here is that this is an enormous step forward for the organisation in its data challenges. Now, data literacy is literally something that we are moving forward with, but we're moving forward to make sure that everybody in the organisation is able to not only interpret the data, but understand the product that they input will ultimately determine then the output. So we're working now on how we change the resources that we're putting into, for instance, the incident recording system, the government's incident recording software, because we need watch managers to input very specific incident data so that we can analyse it better and therefore understand our communities. We're making sure now, as we're working with partner agencies on the literacy for them to understand what our service needs. And then we can also understand the quality assurance of that data as well. So it's internal and also external. But then from a strategic leadership perspective, and of course into your office, Commissioner, as well, it then provides us with really sound data for us to be held to account with. It allows communities to hold us to account on the data we collected on the community groups and the risk within their areas. And ultimately then the service will truly resource to risk for the society that we're trying to serve. It's a whole systems approach. Everybody needs to be more literate in this, but we're moving in small steps at the moment because of where we are with the data, but ultimately the service has a direction and we have a plan to deliver on that. Thank you.
So JD, will that also include training? Because we know that are your current IT systems and support, are they up to scratch? What are the challenges that you face around this?
I would say the main challenge that we've got is the software that we've utilised. It hasn't been modernised for some time. Now, we've brought a new iteration into the service around how we use data and how that informs our risk and resource model. The next steps, as Damien's alluded to, is that we now need to work with other providers and other services to make sure that we are benefiting from their experiences. And we've benchmarked again against the best software out there to make sure that the products we're purchasing and we're working with are actually delivering in the way we want them to. Now, we will use this through the training that we're giving to watch managers and to crews and to middle managers to make sure the product we're shaping is correct. Ultimately, instead of this being once every 3 years where we review the product that we give and the product we use for the services business case, this needs to be a monthly iterative process. By the time we go to refresh the risk and resource model in 24-25, we should have had a large data sets. We need to understand those data sets, and of course that gives us a future direction. It's a much better product we've got now. It will be much better in the future because we've matured our processes and also our understanding of that data and what it means to our communities as well.
So do you think that going forward, you're going to create a digital and data strategy going forward?
We will do, yes. The National Fire Chiefs Council has a digital and data strategy, and it's fit for future, the 5-year plan for the fire sector. It also has digital and data as one of its strands in there. Now, the service through Damien as service improvement, we're looking at how we embed those and also along with the fire standards onto data as well. So all of this gives us that whole, that holistic perspective of where we need to be with data. We're on a journey with this because we need to make quite significant investment into these areas. But ultimately, we have that plan. Our finances don't allow us to do immediate and large scale investment. So for us, it's investment over a long period of time. But again, that allows us to develop and mature the data that we've got, and of course, then help our staff to understand the impact that they have on that data, and ultimately the end product and how it fits the communities.
Thank you. I think it's very, very easy just to harvest data, which is like counting of data, for example,
Yes.
safe and well visits and fire safety audits, but it doesn't actually measure the quality or the evaluation and effectiveness. So will you look to develop measures within your data sets to include that? So will you look at broadening, expanding your data sets around those particular activities?
Yes, our director of Ben Owsley, our director for emergency response, he is implementing a performance framework, which will include data against the risk and resource model and to give us a future provision on where we want the service to be. Damien, as Director of Service Improvement and Assurance, along with colleagues in the OPFCC, are providing an assurance framework to evaluate that data, but also it needs to change and it needs to iterate with the communities that we're working on. Again, a digital and data strategy will help us in this format, but we've got the data now, we've got the initial instance, but we are very much focused on, whilst it's a back to basics approach, it is an outcome-based assessment as opposed to an output. We will do quality in the communities, but it will be targeted towards those at risk and those vulnerable, and that's our primacy from the data that we're looking to collect.
I know that this is a huge job to take this forward, and it's great that this is happening. So thank you very much, Chief, for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And that moves us on to talking about our assurance strategy. And the Chief has just suggested there that I have been tasked with coming up and also working with your office to make sure that it aligns with an assurance strategy. And this will focus initially on providing assurance through data and metrics wherever possible. We'll endeavour to make sure that performance data is easy to understand, clear and informative. But as you suggested as well, Commissioner, further assurance will also be provided through reality checks and qualitative reports. So we're making sure that that data is leading to meaningful improvements for our communities. And we suggested this earlier, but we will certainly be looking to benchmark our performance against recognised standards and sector best practice wherever possible. And we want our performance data to not only report on what we have been doing, but help us shape our future direction and priorities. And we've seen this across the sector. For the past 10, 12 years, there has been that focus on prevention activities, and because the focus and the performance data was in those areas, certainly when NYFRS started inspecting, those areas were performing very well because it was that focus of attention. So we just need to ensure that our data is driving our colleagues and staff into the area where we need those improvements. So using data to tell our story, as I've mentioned earlier, data literacy is key for many reasons, but also to ensure that our local context is explained accurately. When it comes to data and statistics, there will always be a time where us as a service will be grouped with other similar services. And on that, we are categorised with a number of other services as predominantly rural. But in comparison to some of these services, we are over 3 times the geographic size of some of them within that group. The only service with a larger geographic area has almost double our annual budget and almost 3 times the available fire engines. And when we were looking at that data, it was interesting because albeit we know we have areas of rurality, our population is slightly higher than the average for these services, but it's distributed over a much larger area, which we all know provides us with our local challenges. So using data as well to enhance experience and not just looking at performance. We've just undertaken a recent trial of a new Firewatch application, which allows our on-call firefighters to update their availability remotely. And that is soon to be released service-wide. The data that we've captured so far suggests slight improvements to our availability, but the data sets as yet are too small to draw any firm conclusions. What is pleasing, though, is the feedback forms from staff have shown extremely positive feedback in both usability and also in their perception of the investment that this shows in them as on-call firefighters. And just doing that, and through the talks that we've had with subject matter experts and academics that are doing this work elsewhere in the sector, they have suggested that the use of such applications does show an improved availability when we've looked at that elsewhere across England FRSs.
Damien, when's it going to be rolled out across the service? And I know it's been really well received so far.
I believe, Commissioner, but again, with only having the PowerPoint in front of me, hopefully JD or someone else will put their hand up to say I've got it wrong, but I believe it's this week that we're rolling that out across service-wide.
Good. Jonathan.
Just on that point, our aspect from the SLT into this has just been to make sure that we're rolling out a credible product. So whilst Firewatch has been opened up so we can give people the access into there, we are once again just making sure that it's a credible product people use. We're again training and helping people to utilise the system so we can reap the rewards of the data that we bring back from there. If at any point we need to, of course, and that will be reduced to make sure it's being functional and used specifically in the areas we need it to, those stations with short availability, before we then push it back out towards the service. And that's obviously how we'll report the benefits to yourselves and the public through the appropriate forums. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, Commissioner, how we look forward. So, as we've suggested, as a sector, we still have lots to learn about the benefits of data and digital solutions. The National Fire Chiefs Council's digital and data strategy sets an ambition to improve understanding and sharing that best practice throughout fire and rescue services. Internally, we need to build a culture where leaders see data as an asset and use it also as an asset. We need to appreciate what is available out there, and we're working very hard at the moment to speak to partners, both internal and external, to make sure that we have that information. But we need to ensure that when we create solutions, we need to make sure that they're tailored towards our context and they're not just a copy and paste of best practice from elsewhere, because we understand our individuality and the challenges and the local context of North Yorkshire. We are exploring those opportunities, both internal and external, and we have started that dialogue with a number of sector experts and academics to seek out these improvements. Throughout all of this, we need to ensure that we are starting this journey with the end in mind. And as you've suggested, and the Chief has quite rightly said, that digital and data strategy, we need to clearly define what success looks like so we can monitor the progress along that journey and the improvements that we want to make.
That's great. Thank you very much, Damien, for that presentation. Thank you. Lots of questions there and answered. So thank you once again. So we'll go on to agenda item 5, which is the performance update. And James, I believe that you are going to be doing this, please.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I shall just share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the performance pack for the period November 2022 through to January 23. I'm going to start with the incident demand during those 3 months. If I draw your attention to the top left-hand graph, you'll see in the month of December, there's a particularly high number of incidents. What I can say is this is attributed to some of the weather that we experienced with storms Arwen and Bara, which were named by the Met Office in November and December time. So that accounts for some of the special service type calls that we received, which involves making structures safe. Sometimes obviously loose materials come off roofs, and things like that, and obviously people need our assistance, and that's what that can be attributed to. If I could draw your attention to the bottom left graph, then that is again showing the 3 months across the last 3 years. You will see that this year is higher than the previous 2 years. 2021 we can attribute to obviously the COVID lockdown and the drop off of incidents that we saw during that period, and 2022 obviously that started to increase in people back in the workplace. What I can say is this year that we have experienced, as well as those special service calls, also the increase in false alarms. We'll talk a bit more about those in the slides to come, if I could. So if we look at false alarms for 2022 on the left and 21 on the right, overall, not a significant difference, but there is a few additional incidents that you'll see in the York area in particular this last month. What I can say is there's some of the things that we're doing around reducing those false alarm calls. We've got a new AFA policy that is going live on the 1st of April. This is part of the RRM proposal that we saw come through around changing those times of our attendance to not attend certain incident types, or premises types I should say, which we would deem as lower risk, and they are those types that where we'd have people on the premises normally that could raise the alarm, and also that people don't.
But James, we can't hear you. I just wondered if you've just knocked yourself onto mute, although I can't see the sign up.
Can you hear me now, Commissioner?
I can, thank you.
Apologies, I don't know what happened there. So what I was saying there is ultimately that we're releasing a new AFA policy in the 1st of April, and that includes broadening the times where we don't respond to the lesser risk type premises where people would be in attendance to be able to raise the alarm. And also that we would continue to respond to those incidents where people sleep, and also attend premises where what we'd call a double knock, where somebody would also either back up that alarm with a personal call, or also where 2 alarms are sounding at the same time, we would still attend those types of premises. The other thing that we're doing in the very near future is moving to 5 levels of sort of action. I've talked previously about the 4 levels, which was about engaging when we first attend premises to make every contact count, a little bit that you had a presentation about last month. Moving on from that, we'll increase the level of engagement from crews if we have a repeat call. And the third part to that is where we engage our specialist business fire safety staff to work with premises and responsible owners to reduce those calls. Now, the 4th element was before we could then go straight to enforcement action, where we would use the regulatory form fire safety order to take formal action against those premises. Well, we're looking to introduce an additional stage in there before we get to that, and open up the opportunity to charge premises for repeat occurrences. And again, that is there is some sound rationale being put around that to ensure that that only targets the premises where we believe it is most appropriate, alongside obviously the relevant risk. And again, that 5th level will still be there, where we can take formal enforcement action where we need to with those premises where we feel they're not taking adequate management arrangements to keep people safe.
James, can you
Yes.
tell me, what is your aspiration to, so when I have a look at these false alarms, all the information that here is, all the data that's here, are you hoping to halve the amount of false alarms? I mean, what's the aspiration? Maybe this is really to the chief, but you know, what are you hoping for?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. First of all, Commissioner, I can't see hands at the moment, so whether the chief officer wanted to come in as well. But ultimately, we have to recognise that having fire alarms is a good thing, first of all, that premises installing these are taking a proactive approach to keep people safe. What we really want to identify through data, which James has been talking about, is those which are false alarms that could have been prevented. And you know, what is right for one area of North Yorkshire would not necessarily be right in another. We'll talk on the next slide a little bit about the types of premises we see these incidents occurring in. So, for example, in non-residential buildings, the top three areas would be education, hospitals, and then industrial manufacturing. So quite clearly, a hospital with high-risk patients is going to have a high level of number of detectors within that building, and that's proportionate to the number of calls that we would get to that. So what I would say is there's not a direct answer. What we would like to see is a reduction in those, and that is going to differ from the different premises types that we have and the risk associated with those types of alarm.
Commissioner, if I may.
Yes.
Sorry, I've got a little bit of delay on here. So ultimately, with false alarms, now this is part of the national strategy as well through the national chiefs, because every service recognises that we do attend nationally. This equates to around 50% of calls around the UK. So we can set aspirational targets of what we're looking to achieve, but the main consensus of what we're looking to deliver here is around behavioural change. And that is behavioural change within industries or within in the premises that ultimately are high risk, which is why we still intend through the RM to attend high risk or sleeping risk premises. And in those premises where there is a continuation of alarms and it isn't resolved by the responsible persons, that's where we of course have an intervention with them to try and reduce that, because every time we are attending an incident of this type, an unwanted fire signal, not just an alarm, an unwanted fire signal, that's time away from when crews could be working with their communities or doing their training. So our main aim of this is to work with our prevention and protection team to have an impact on the unwanted fire signals, where it's an alarm and it's a good intent. Then of course we then provide education at that point there. Our intent is to make sure that we can minimise our attendance to these as much as possible to then maximise the time that crews are spent on training or in the community. And it's striking that fine balance. As James has rightly said, it isn't something that you will ever remove completely. There are alarms, those alarms will still continue. What we need to do is use the data to educate communities and to educate crews on the impact we need to have and make sure the risk and resource model sends the appropriate resources to the risk and that's appropriate response by the service as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take us on to the next slide then if I could, because it is relevant. So as I've already touched upon, the top three property types here are housing single occupancy, purpose-built flats and maisonettes up to 3 stories, and self-contained sheltered housing. And what we're doing at the moment is going through a cleansing exercise around recategorisation of some of those, so we can really understand, like the chief has outlined, really understand why these are happening and how they're occurring, and to get into the root cause and ensure that we're being proactive in those spaces and with the right people, and that's going to go a long way towards that. As I said, there was some information given on the last PAM in February around the every contacts counts concept, which is ensuring that when we are coming into contact with people, that we are absolutely maximising that engagement and ensuring that we're educating premise owners and working with them together to reduce any reoccurring false alarms. Moving on to any non-residential buildings, then, as I said, they are categorised really under our top 3, which are through education, hospitals and industrial manufacturing. And what I can say, again, this is a really good example of where we have our business fire safety experts working with individuals, particularly at the moment in Hawes and Selby. We have a couple of premises there where we are working very closely with to support them to ensure we've got detectors in the right places, to ensure that their practices align with what we would expect and to keep people there safe, and indeed to negate any false alarms that would draw us away from activity that we could use better to help people safe, and indeed maintain equipment, training, and the other responsibilities and duties of our firefighters. So this is the final one on automatic fire alarms, but really to outline here that this is showing us that we've seen a positive decrease in January. What I would like to say is that this, at the moment, we would like to draw a direct correlation to the work that we're doing, but I would be lying there and saying this is a direct result of everything that we've done. We need more data over a longer period and to make that causal effect. However, it is a positive sign. We do know we are having a positive effect through feedback and through some of the other areas that we've talked about. But as Damien's already touched upon, we really want to make sure we understand and can evidence all the work that we're doing to ensure that it has having that direct or indirect effect. I can take us on to this slide, which is about our fire cover availability. So this is about our fire appliances that are available at what times. And on the right hand side there, you'll see that broken down into percentage and then a bar chart in the middle there. What you can see is an improving picture in January, which is promising, but we often see this obviously after the holiday period where people are back at home near their fire stations, and obviously during December they have other works and time and family that they want to spend time with, and that does impact on availability. Just again to reassure the public around that, and to remind them of the 4 lines of sort of approach to fire cover, and that we first of all we do that pre-planning in the districts across each of the fire stations to ensure we're maximising that availability where we can. Then we introduce operational staffing reserve to supplement those areas where we have less availability. Thirdly, then that goes into our fire control, who look at that and spread that cover as part of our fire cover model. And then finally, our duty silver in a more dynamic picture when needed, moves resources to ensure that we have people in the right places at the right time when we need them. Again, this is reflected in the next slide, which is more specific around our fire stations. What I can say, we have had a couple of successful recruits courses that have taken place in February, March, which we saw 15 people pass successfully from, and will be landing at fire stations now. So again, that will help at some of those fire stations where we have not as good availability. And just a reminder that we had a further 10 from the course in November that again have landed now on fire stations, and helping to keep those fire engines available. We've got a further 2 courses in June and September this year. Additionally, some of the work that I talked about a minute ago with fire control and those officers and the pre-planning in districts to ensure availability has been helped by the creation of a live dashboard, which has now been circulated to each of those parties, which now gives a live feed when people are changing availability and where our fire appliance availability moves up and down, so they can be proactive in that and take action to ensure we're maximising the resources that we've got, and encouraging staff to spread that cover where we can.
James, can I ask you a couple of questions on this, please? So
yeah,
it's really great to see that there has been an increase in availability, especially the stations that normally struggle, for example, Huntington, Sherburn, Somerbridge, which is fantastic. But I just wondered, you know, is there a target availability for these on-call stations, and what's the root cause of low availability?
Yeah. So The aim, of course, is to have all fire engines available all of the time. However, we know that with our resources and our on-call, that we need to be able to have a flexible model to deliver and keeping people safe. And we do that through our existing fire cover model, which maximises the resources that we've got to ensure that people receive a response appropriately with people trained and skilled in order to deliver an emergency response. What we do know is obviously we struggle in certain areas of our demographic, if you like. We touched earlier upon the rural nature of the county and also the populations in those areas in order to have people within the appropriate range of fitness and capability and a number of other factors in order to become a firefighter, which is a challenge. The other thing is that the training that people had to do again takes them away from their primary employment, and they often have to take leave to do that. So we put things in place to ensure that we can be as flexible with people as possible. One of the things that we have done around recruitment is to ensure everything is done in one place and on one day, where as much as possible. So when they're coming away from their normal place of primary employment, if you like, that they're only spending a day and they're managing to go through that recruitment process, doing the tests and things that they need to do as efficiently and effectively as possible. And we've had some really good feedback around that. And of course, we talked about data earlier on, and this feeds into this work, if you like. So the better we understand where people are, their needs and their abilities to be able to become a firefighter, then the better we can help service that. And that will help us feed also part of a piece of work that we're midway through now is reviewing our fire cover model to ensure that, again, we've got the right resources in the right places at the right times, based on our ever changing risk in our communities, and that's appropriate. And of course, that's efficient and effective as part of that. I've seen the Chief Fire Officer's also got his hand up. I didn't know whether he wanted to come at that point.
No, thank you for that, James. I think it's right that we remember that we have stated and be transparent that we are critically reviewing to this organisation, and that includes operations and all into our on-call model. Now, we're looking to invest into the on-call model, but as part of that, we also need to recognise that our risk and resource model, as the data adapts and we mature that, we will further understand the times that when we need our on-call appliances available and what resources we need available there. Now, the review that the Deputy Chief is undertaking along with his SLT colleagues is to do exactly that. And that is to mature the processes down to each individual station area, understand when people are at work, when people are not at work, and what that risk represents, and whether on a dynamic model, we need all of the appliances available. This is an aged approach where it is just a carpet approach, or 100% availability 100% of the time. A true resourcing to risk approach, as in other services, is therefore where we appropriately resource at all times of the day. And that may mean that we don't need 100% availability across the county. Now, this is where we're reviewing. It will be data-led, and this will be future iterations of the risk and resource plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, JD.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the next slide then. This slide is telling us about our business fire safety activity, also known as protection activity. If I draw your attention to the two slides on the left, so both top and bottom, so this is about the overall activity that's taken place and then broken down into the role specifically, so our specialist fire safety officers and our operational staff. What you will see is a spike in September, which was part of our business fire safety week. So that was a lot of more engagement rather than taking enforcement action against premises. So our focus was very much about the medium to high risk type premises that we wouldn't normally visit because they're not our highest risks. However, we don't want that part of our commercial premises to miss out on that advice, and it's a key stage in order to do that. So it's a real focus during that time, and that's why you'll see a peak in activity. If I draw your attention to the 2 slides on the right, this is our RRO activity. So this is about our risk-based inspection program. So this is about being proactive in that space and identifying the highest risk premises within the county and carrying out in audit against the regulatory reform fire safety order. And that's done both by specialists and our operational colleagues on fire stations. What you'll see on that top graph on the bottom line is data cleansing. So we'd identified ourselves, and this was reinforced by the HMI visit, that there was a certain amount of data cleansing that was required to our CFMIS program, which was basically the software that we manage all this data in and tells us where to visit. And we recognised that there was a couple of small areas in there that were giving us some results that we didn't quite recognise. And we've identified that, and that's that work that's going on in the background to absolutely make sure that we are going to the right places. What assurance I can give to the public is that this, if anything, gave us more high risks than before. So it's not categorising higher risks as lower. So if anything, we were doing more than or visiting places that in some cases we didn't necessarily need to. And again, we just want to absolutely make sure we're being as efficient and effective as possible with our time. If I draw your attention to the bottom graph, there is a slight dip in December. This again is because, again, premises don't always operate during Christmas, and therefore we can't always access some of those types of premises. I'll move this on to our prevention activity then. So this graph in particular talks about categories that don't include safe and well. So we'll move on to safe and well onto the and safety in the home in the next slide. This is more about the other activities that we undertake. What you will see on the left-hand side is a spike in July of activity. That was all the proactive engagement that we were carrying out with youth and around wildfire and water safety, or during that hot period that we had, and felt it was really important that we got out and engaged with those people, because we know that it's not just people that live in the area, it's also people who are transient and maybe visiting. So it's really important for us to be visible in those spaces. If I draw your attention to the right hand side, there's a slight dip in September. Well, that directly correlates to the Business Fire Safety Week work that we were doing, and again, so that's exactly what I would expect to see. And then moving into December again, this is about people not necessarily being available. It's a change in the type of work we do at that time of year. We still engage it, but not always is that necessarily captured, which is something that, again, that we're learning from, that we need to make sure is part of the figures. Apologies. So moving on then to the final slide, this is about our safe and well activity. So safety in people's homes. If you can see on the left-hand graph about our safe and well activity in September, this directly correlates to a refresh of a partnership through Safe and Well. So recognise that the data that we were using to identify the vulnerable was good, but it could be better. So there was a slight pause in that to refresh that partnership and add to the data sources, if you like, including things through the council, like Living Well, through charities, through the housing associations, Drink and Drugs Association, and a number of other different partners, to make sure that we're absolutely maximising those referrals and targeting the most vulnerable in our community. And what you can see on that launch there at the end of September, that's really increased numbers, and that was a really pleasing thing to see, because part of this was about, we were expecting to see perhaps even numbers slightly dip, because the type of people that we'd be visiting were the most vulnerable, as we said, and they sometimes take longer because of the complexities of those types of cases. However, we've managed to maintain and really get momentum around that, and not only continue to be completing quality safe and well visits with the most vulnerable, but also keeping the numbers where we want them and keep that increase there. As we would expect, in December there was a slight decrease because people don't always want us in their homes during that time. So again, that accounts for that, and it has started to pick up again in January, as you would expect. That's everything from myself as part of this presentation, Commissioner, and happy to take any questions.
Well, thanks very much, James. That was really detailed, and you've answered an awful lot of my questions there. So that's really good. So thank you very much for that. So going back to the agenda, we have agenda item 6, and that's questions from the public. So I think we have one here now. I'll read it from the chat bar. And this is from Mr. Steve Howley. Very nice to hear from you, Steve. It's brilliant. And you've come in on Twitter, and it says, false alarms are the least of your worries. What is North Yorkshire PFCC doing about widespread crewing problems and lack of fire engine availability? So this is operational. So I'm going to pass this on to the Chief, Jonathan Dyson.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think it's just worthwhile for the context for the public. Steve is the leader of the union within North Yorkshire, so that gives a context to the answer. Effectively, we're doing an enormous amount. Now, I disagree with Steve when we mentioned, excuse me, I disagree with Steve that this isn't the least of our worries. When you have a product from the public where it represents around 50% of our calls, it's a significant amount of our business, so therefore it's a significant focus for the service. Notwithstanding the road risk for all the travelling and the miles that we do to these type of incidents, it is also, as I previously stated, a concern because we're taking crews away from the public and also from their training, the true aspects of what we're here for within the role. So we are focusing rightly on false alarms to remove them as much as possible, reduce and educate our communities, and then also train our staff appropriately where we need to for that correct intervention. Now, to move on to what we do around crewing problems and lack of fire engine availability. Well, Steve, once again, is aware because we do a lot of work internally with our trade unions and welcome this challenge. Again, we're doing an enormous amount. Firstly, our crewing problems. We have enough firefighters to crew all of our appliances. Where we haven't in the past is where we have a lot of temporaries. Now, you remember from taking up post last August, substantively, I then implemented a talent pipeline. Now, that talent pipeline is substantiating all ranks from Chief Fire Officer through to Crew Manager, which should place around 57, that's a removal of 57 temporary posts into substantive posts, effectively substantiating our entire leadership structure. That will be finished and is on track to finish, as we've declared into the inspectorate as well, for Q1 23-24 financial year. So we've made significant progress in a very short period of time. How that impacts our crewing is then that because all the temporary moves then move back and become substantiated, it then allows us to reset the organisation so we have all of our firefighters that are available on appliances. How this will also help our availability is because we've had over 27 temporary contracts from on-call firefighters into our whole-time positions. So, of course, 27 staff detracted from our on-call staffing reduces on-call availability. So we've taken a strategic approach to delivering tactical objectives, and we are achieving that. We are also working with the trade unions and everybody else that needs to do with the whole systems approach on improving welfare perspectives for firefighters, because we do have quite high sickness within North Yorkshire, and we are suffering at certain times a very short notice sickness, which takes crews off Friday, Saturday evenings and at very short notice, which, as James has described, it means we have to do dynamic cover moves to make sure that we have our availability. Again, I'll take yourself and also the public back to the point where we will always make sure that we dynamically cover all areas of risk within the county. And again, as our data and processes mature, we will be able to truly resource the risk and evidence how and why we're doing it. But again, we're doing everything we can. It is an iterative process. We've made significant progress and will continue to do so in line with yourself and the governance there, and also with the HMI. Many thanks.
Thanks very much, Chief. I think it's right to say that I can assure the members of the public and also our stakeholders that are watching today that there is a tremendous amount of work being done behind the scenes on this, and that maybe Mr. Howley, in your role of you know, in the FBU, you can help FRS in improving the availability, working with us. Thank you. Right, okay, let's go back onto the agenda now. So let's see, just bring the agenda back up. So we've had questions from the public. Agenda item 7, any other business? I don't believe there is. And agenda item 8, date of the next meeting, which will be in May in 2023. So thanks very much for everybody watching and taking part. Really appreciate it. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.